Blog Talk Radio.
Well, a warm good evening and welcome to all of you. I'm your host, Cinnamon Moon. Thank you for joining me this evening. My path work over the past 45 years is my passion. I am a spiritual coach and clairsentient reader. I love sharing the sacred mysteries and insights with my clients. You can pick up a copy of my book, A Medicine Woman Speaks, at all major booksellers as well as on Nook or Kindle. The chat room is open. If you're at the computer, by all means, stop in and say hello. You're also welcome to call in with any topical comments or questions that you may have. To get in the queue, the number is 914-338-0494, then option number 1. Those interested in furthering their spiritual development will find that the Study Center offers an abundance of resource material and personal services. Stop by spiritlodge.info and take a look around. And, of course, for those who haven't done so already, you're invited to join the Two Moons Talking group over on Facebook. Stay informed with announcements and updates as well as the link for each week's show. I've got a fantastic show for you this evening. My guest is Marilyn Redmond, author, speaker, therapist, and consultant. Her lectures, interviews, and channelings appear on YouTube. Her website is Angelica'sGifts.com. In addition, Marilyn is board certified to do regression and past life therapy. She offers readings and private channelings. Her blog is marilynredmondbooks.blogspot.com, and her writings are at amazon.com. Tonight we'll be discussing her book, The Real Meaning of 2012, Heaven on Earth. Welcome to the show, Marilyn.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. Let's talk a little about your book. What was so important about 2012 that inspired you to write it?
Well, I was actually channeling one day, and I channel actually the third Saturday of every month, and people are invited to come. And during this channeling, Spirit told me I would be putting that information into a book because they wanted that information to be available more than just on YouTube. So they wanted it in a hands-on platform that people could read and continue to read, because the information is actually not just for today, but we're going through this changing of energy process now for the next several years. It's going to be a book that's going to maintain its validity and help and truth for you. So it's not just a book for right now.
Mm-hmm. And why is discussing the emotional part of our lives so important in understanding the year of 2012? And why discuss that now?
Well, that's really a good question, because 2012 was the changing of the energy from, we've been immersed in negative, dark energy, and at that point in time it changed so that more positive light force was coming to the earth, and that energy essence is what the consciousness inside of us determines if we're allowing it to, and most of us just take it in and don't realize that we're being bombarded with all this fear. So our consciousness has been based in fear. So knowing that now there has been a shift in energy, that the cosmos has changed its positioning and is allowing more love into the Earth's atmosphere and into our lives, and that changing our consciousness is very important, out of the fear into the love of who we truly are. In my book, there's 2 charts that are absolutely new. I created one, and my friend created the other one, showing how our consciousness is really the essence of who we are. And as we raise that inside of ourselves, we come into a higher vibration of that unconditional love, that heaven that we talk about, so that we have cooperation in our life and prosperity, abundance. And it's really a, you've heard it before probably, but this is an inside job. Nobody can change our life, but we have to do that ourselves. So if you understand the dynamics, and that's what my book's really about. This is a precursor to my next book. This book explains the changing of those dynamics, that we can come into a higher consciousness, and therefore we're going to be having love influencing our lives rather than the fear. So we can release the ego, put the resistance to the love that's been around us, but it hasn't been necessarily safe to open our hearts to. So consciousness is really what this is all about.
Yeah, I noticed even this year, as the new year started, the flow of energy was wonderful, and I had so many people commenting to me, "Did you feel the good energy?" And I'm going, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's wonderful."
And it's gradually growing more and more, so it's dispelling more fear all the time, and more people will be aware of it. I think that's great that they recognized it.
Yeah. And how would you say fear keeps us in illusion?
Could you repeat that again?
How would fear keep us in illusion?
Well, that's a really good question, because most people, we live in the third dimension, which is material world, which is around us, and we react off of that. Everything we react from is fear-based. So we keep ourselves in this illusion that we're not connected to love or a loving higher power, an essence that is unconditional love in the cosmos, a spiritual energy that holds everything together like glue. And so we have been out of the awareness. It's like we're waking up to seeing, it's kind of like a mirage. If you're driving your car down the road and it looks like water down the road on the road, and you get closer and closer and you realize, oh, it's not water, it was a mirage. And all our lives have been a big mirage or illusion, and as we're moving more into that love, we're starting to see, oh, the illusion wasn't real. I survived it. I went through all the necessary lessons, but the reality is there's only love, and that's the reality that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And your book is a blend of scientific and spiritual terms. How do they both fit into the information?
You have some really good questions. What I'm discovering, I've actually written an article about this I hope to get published, but science and spirituality are really talking about the same energy. Science sees it from hands-on. You touch it, feel it, smell it, and all the different senses that we have. And spirituality is looking at that same energy, but it's invisible. So there's nothing you can measure or weigh, because energy at a higher consciousness is not seeable, and so science disregards that energy, but it truly is still there. So they're talking about the same thing, but in two different vibrations. The lower vibrations is the third dimensional world that we see, and the higher vibrations are the spiritual world, which we are finding through meditation and other sources that put us into an altered state.
Yeah, years ago I used to really resist scientific theories about spiritual matters, and I thought they're trying to put the intangible into a tangible laboratory, and it's not going to work. But now I see that quantum physics is really bringing out some good points and validating what the ancients have known for generations,
Well, it's really interesting you mention that. In the research I do, I discovered there's a college, actually university in England, that this year is planning to be able to manifest matter from energy, and therefore show that it is actually the same thing that they're talking about. And science, of course, uses their terms, and spirituality uses separate terms that are different. And maybe we'll be able to come into a merging understanding that it's all one. It doesn't matter what you label it.
Right. And energy is mentioned often in your book. In your experience, how does that apply to our consciousness?
Well, it's all, our lives we are energy fields. We are not mechanisms like a lot of medical protocol has taken it for granted that, you put in the food and the machine goes down the road. We're actually spiritual energy. And when that spiritual energy vibrates at different vibrations, that's our identity the things around us vibrate at different vibrations. That's our friends and the trees and the grass and everything that exists has an energy in it. To say that that's not true is part of the illusion. They don't see beyond the appearance. Inside everything there's some form of energy at a vibrational level, and as we raise our vibrations in consciousness higher and higher in our lives, and in one of the charts of my books, it shows stairs going up to heaven, you might say, higher consciousness, and with angels on those stairs, and words to describe the different levels of how you would feel or what you would experience at that level of vibration. So you could actually pace yourself of saying, oh, I have released this darker, denser, fearful energy, and I'm feeling better today, and this is how I feel. And looking at the chart, you can start to see how your energy vibrations can actually adjust. You know, when I was very, very sick several years back, I thought everything was in concrete, and somebody told me this too shall pass, and I thought it was a big joke. But the actual truth is that energy is always in motion, and the only thing that stops it from moving is our resistance or fear. So as we start to understand that we are energy and it is moving, and emotions are energy in motion, that's our, you might say, yardstick for where we are, is what kind of feelings we have shows us where our emotions are and where our essence is in the vibrational force that we're living in. So it's very important that the more we understand about ourselves, I think that we make better choices.
Oh, absolutely. Can you address, when you're doing your channelings, before I go on to more questions with the book, when you're doing your channelings, how does your consciousness respond to the energy? What shifts do you go through?
Oh my, that's a interesting question. I don't understand it all. I wish I did. The energy shifts that happen for me is I go into a total surrender, so that the main person I channel is John the Divine, which is the John that wrote the book in the Bible, chapter of John and Revelations. And I just move out of the way so that his energy can take over my vocal cords, and he talks through my vocal cords. But before that happens, there's generally a period of my adjusting to his higher energy to be able to do that. Generally, he tells me ahead of time. I don't like to be totally unaware of what's going on inside of me and helping others. So I usually get a briefing ahead of time of what the topic for the conversation will be, what his message is, what he's trying to help others with that are going to be coming. Sometimes it's even talking with others passed over for people to have comfort from that. So I usually get a little preview, and this puts me into a higher consciousness, so I'm available spiritually to connect on his energy level. And then as I allow that energy to move into my vocal cords, to use those as his vocal cords in speaking, I also have a gatekeeper, Martha, who helps to keep me safe. So entities do not show up that shouldn't be there, that are not appropriate and of the highest level. So she kind of guards the way for me to be as safe as possible in this state and allow the highest, truest message to come through. And these messages are on YouTube, and I just had one posted from last month on YouTube, which was about understanding grace. His message last month was for people to better understand grace in their lives and how that works. So his messages are of high quality informational truth that has not maybe been understood quite in the same way, so we have a more complete understanding rather than some of the misinformation that's been out there prior, and people not need to know sometimes the more accurate information. I just reviewed a book where a person had some information in their book, and it was not really the right connection of putting definitions to words. And so John helps people to understand that this is the way it evolves and the truth of that particular situation rather than what they've maybe learned in the past.
Mm-hmm. Now, when he comes through, do you is your consciousness with him? Are you aware of what you're saying, and does your voice change? I'm just curious.
Oh yes, my voice does change, and I am partially aware. He's doing the speaking, but since I've been briefed, I pretty much know, the major drift of what he's saying. So I'm listening too, you might say, and so things will be coming through, and I'll say, oh, I wouldn't have said it that way. He goes on and on and on. He's doing his thing. So when I channel John, there's a particular voice, and then when I channel Saint Germain, usually it's a higher vibration. Archangel Michael is a very, very strong vibration. He comes in with a great deal of energy. When I channel Jesus, that energy is so strong, it usually takes me about a week to come back down out of that higher consciousness. Mother Mary has got that kind of energy, too, where it is such a much more pure, you might say, energy that it takes me longer to, you might say, recuperate. When I channel John, usually about 24 hours later, I'm back into par and handling things very well. But it does adjust my being able to do things. It takes energy to do this. And, yes, they come in at different voices. I do Archangel Ariel. She loves to send blessings to people, which and many times are like a meditative exercise to help people raise their consciousness, a little something they can do to visualize in their experience while they're there with her, and she's sending out the energy to help them lift their consciousness up. So her voice is usually a higher pitch, like my gatekeeper Martha. So, yes, they all come in with a different particular voice.
Well, that's interesting, yeah. Now, do you feel that energy can change and transform into the fourth dimension?
Well, my experience is that it can. You see, energy is always moving, and it's only stuck when fear is in the way. And so if you release the fearful situations or the fearful emotions, then what's left is the love that it's been covering. So it's really not that big a mystery of how to get from third dimension to fourth dimension. There are lots of spiritual programs that help you do this, especially the 12 steps and your Casey Association for Research and Enlightenment has a course that you can take called Search for God. And there's other places you can go to help assist in this. But it's a matter of releasing the negative energy, identifying all your fears and releasing them, and then immediately saying, please replace this space with God's love and grace, light and peace, joy. You want to see, instead of continuing in your old foundation, move the foundation into the health of love and well-being. So, yes, the transition can happen, and I've been going through a huge one last night of changing energy from some old past trauma into some current and like a rebirth last night. And so we can all do it. It's a matter if we're willing to open up our hearts and let the love flow through us. And when we've been so conditioned in fear from all those things around us, the government, medicine, all kinds of health issues, all of these things keep that flow of love from moving through us. And the truth is that when we have God's love moving through us, or the God of your understanding, that spiritual loving energy, we're going to be healthy. And so a lot of medicine is going to change considerably with this change of energy, because we will become our own doctors. Physician, heal thyself. We will be able to intuitively figure out our own medical problems and know what to do to resolve them, or what kind of help we will need to resolve them. So things are going to be changing a great deal with this changing of energy into love.
Well, that I'm looking forward to. What are the three basic blocks to a better life that you focus on?
Well, if you had to boil it down to three, I imagine fear would be number one. Fear and anger, those are major ones. And then your behaviors. In the Bible, they call it thoughts, words, and deeds. But your behaviors are your actions. And so many times our actions actually are preventative of loving energy coming between you and the other person. You're actually causing a separation rather than bringing your energy together. So when you learn healthy behaviors, this for me was a huge change. And so when you have fear and anger, usually your communication comes from that. And so to learn how to change your energies to being positive energies, that you're coming from loving communication, you don't have to have the fear, because you know that fear is just, like we talked about an illusion earlier, fear is just blocking the love. And if you want the love, just go past it, and it is a choice. You can choose love or you can choose fear, and today, of course, I do choose love to be my basis of my life. So I can share kind and caring things. I don't have to be afraid to open up to the love today. And the anger that people usually have in their lives is usually things didn't go their way, it wasn't the way they planned it, the person isn't doing what they want, and those are immature ways to handle your life. So as you release the anger and realizing, accept things are just like they were supposed to be, and come into a joyous acceptance that everything is the way it's supposed to be and has come together for your best benefit, you accept it joyously, then you come out of the anger and have a more mature attitude of how can I be helpful to this person, rather than retaliating back in more anger when they send out their anger. Just say, God forgive them, for they know not what they do, and you move out of that immaturity. So what we're really talking about is not only are we growing into maturity, but the planet is assisting and supporting that. The planet is maturing too.
Mhm. Yeah, I believe that all of evolution is pervasive. It's affecting everything that's alive on the planet. So on a global scale, I think when we change our attitudes, that we're contributing to the massiveness of the evolution, and in a good way. I mean, it's so easy to get caught up in the fear-mongering that we hear on the news and propaganda and all the wars that are taking place, and it, people are getting afraid of that kind of thing, and the market and everything, government and the economy, it's all changing. And then we've got the natural disasters that strike too, and that strikes fear into hearts, and people don't understand,
Well, I think you've really raised a really good point, because when we are at peace, then that's what we do send out to others, and that's what will bring peace on earth. The natural disasters you mentioned are actually the earth releasing its negative energy so it can go back into a peaceful consciousness too. The earth has consciousness. Mm-hmm. Not everybody would maybe understand that, but we're a microcosm, and the universe is a macrocosm, and as we change, the earth changes. And as the earth changes, we change. As you mentioned, it's all interrelated. So as the earth is releasing its negativity, it does show up as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and other disasters, tidal waves and so forth. And so the earth is going through its rebirthing just as if we are.
Yeah. And when we get involved in relationships and achieving our goals and focusing on our wishes, you feel that can work against us?
No, the trick is it coming from your ego or is it coming from your heart? There's nothing wrong with wishes and goals and trying to be achieving and successful. Before I went to one of my classes a couple of years ago on the car ride up to Seattle, all of a sudden inside I just said, I am a success. And it was not that I had to be out there in the forefront of all the population and people recognizing it. It was just like internally I felt successful. And I think that that's a major thing is where's this drive coming from? Is it for survival, that you have to prove a point, or can you just let other people have their point of view also and be happy? So it's a matter of, are you coming from your heart with your wishes? Are you wishing well for others and that they're doing well? And overcoming their adversity, and what can you do to be helpful? And the more we give, the more we're giving from our heart, the better our lives get. That's really what the Heaven on Earth is about, is we're sharing our love with others. We release the resistance of the fear, and that's the Heaven on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so the mindset of what success is in these terms then would be that it needs to come from heart rather than the head.
Exactly. We get out of our heads into our hearts. The trick is, how much can you open your heart to the love that is within? And the love that resides, there was a book called Seed of the Soul. The love is in your heart, and the more you take away the resistance, the more love can manifest out around you and pave the way in front of you and be shared with others. And I just shared a loving story about Mother Teresa on the last channeling of what she called a loving example. So it's a matter of how much can you trust the universe to take care of you, knowing that everything you have in need is right there and it's there for you to help others with. So the more you can open up your heart, the better it gets.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100% on that. I'm always talking about how the Spirit moves through us, our inner spirits, and how they come through the senses and they come through the heart, and they're not steering us in bad directions, and we're not losing our minds when we listen to those things, you know. They're there to help.
Exactly. That's the truth is within. You know, my old way was to look at experts and doctors and to look at particular churches or whatever for answers. And what I found out is my answers come from within. They come from my heart. What is the most loving thing I can do for you and for me? And when I am in that mode, my life comes together wonderfully well.
Yeah, I think that's the case for anyone, and it's very important. Now, people that have experienced a great deal of trauma, whether it's a woman or a man who has been brutally raped or physically attacked, or it's a soldier that's gone to war, or any other number of things, awful things that can happen to somebody, they very often get caught in the role of victim. And I run into this a lot, where somebody just can't climb out of the victim role no matter what you offer them. And it really has to be a personal choice, I feel, to step out of that and rise above it. Take a lesson from it. You're not going to forget, but you have to have forgiveness too.
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's why my regression therapy and past life regression therapy is so valuable. You can help reframe those situations that occurred that were traumatic. And through reframing it, you can even heal medical problems through reframing what is the root cause of the condition that is now manifested in your life, which medicine calls a medical problem. But all problems are just emotional, and they come from needing fear-based of some sort. When you go into a regression, it's just like going into meditation. You go into the soul of the person, and you can reframe it and help them walk out of it into a resolution of a loving solution, and with that forgiveness that you mentioned, which is so important, because that way you're giving up the past for a new today. Forgive. You forgive them to cut the chains for that emotional connection to run their life anymore. They're free of it. And so when they're free to be themselves, which is the truth of the love that is within them, and they can manifest that instead of continuing in the old rut of victim. And yes, I won an international writing contest called All Time Victim. I was very convincing at that time because I was still in that spot.
What intrigued you to study regression?
Well, I think that Spirit had a bigger part of that than I did. It's an interesting story. I was attending a spiritual class in Seattle, and the two men had flown in for the program from the Edgar Casey Association, and it was a wonderful day program, and then one fellow who's now passed over, but Henry said, I'm going to be having a class to teach past life regression. It was in Virginia. And I'd like all of you to come and sign up and, give me your deposit and you can come join us. And I had no idea what he was talking about. This was just beyond me at the time. This was like over 10 years ago now. And Spirit inside of me started talking to me and said, well, you're going to go up and sign up. And I said, well, I don't know what he's talking about. And Spirit said, well, just go up anyway. Get in line. So I got up and I went in line, and I'm standing there thinking of all the reasons why I can't do this. So I said, well, how do you get there? He says, well, you have frequent flyer ticket miles. Just use your frequent flyer miles. Oh, okay. Well, and then I said, well, you got to pay for a hotel room. And he says, well, you can share with somebody. It doesn't have to be that pricey. And so anyway, by the time it was my turn to go up and pay the deposit, I did, not knowing where I was going. I've never been to the state of Virginia before, not knowing what kind of a class I was taking. didn't know who I'd be rooming with, and I had no clue of what was going on. But I signed up and I went. And I had some of the most marvelous spiritual experiences at that particular class where I discovered that I could see energy. I could see people who had passed over, and they spoke to me, and I gave messages to people. And a lot of interesting things happened because of that. And it opened up a lot of different spiritual gifts that I didn't know I really had. But the room was so full of wonderful energy that supported it. It just kind of all came to light and actually was levitated at one point. So it was a marvelous experience. So I went back for an advanced part of that teaching. And then in Seattle, they had some hypnosis classes, and I started taking those because I felt I needed some more background. And so now I'm internationally board certified as a past life regression therapist, and I'm also on the American Board of Hypnotherapy. And I've discovered that Spirit leads me through whatever the person needs when they come. So it's like I'm just there in the channel, and God takes care of it. And I've had some pretty amazing experiences with medical situations, with relationship situations, being able to release addictions, various things that people come to counselors for. And it's Spirit doing the work. I'm just assisting. Because I know about channeling, it's just kind of I just take the back seat and say, okay, God, whatever I'm supposed to do, just put the words in my mouth. And one day I ran out of words, and I thought, oh, my gosh, what do I do now? And I said, well, what comes next? And all out of my mouth came the right words, and I said to myself, oh, that makes sense. Why didn't I think of that? So I'm not doing that much of the work. It's just happening for me.
So when you're regressing someone, then you're actually channeling at the same time, too, correct?
Part of the time I am, yes. It depends on the situation. I'm very fortunate to have a partner, a fellow in my life who's a wonderful healer and does pranic healing. So he often deals with the physical relief like pain or medical problems that need relief. We've had some amazing situations together that we've helped people who were given a death sentence through medicine and still walking around today. And so he does that, and then oftentimes, also, this is in a different setting than counseling, but in John the Divine will come in and tell the person about a past life that's the basis of what's going on, such as a lady came recently and she had post-traumatic stress disorder, and John came in and told her why this was going on, what the situation was years back that she was still continuing to recreate in her life, and it was marvelous. She walked out of there like a new person, and she said even my girlfriend the next day said, I've changed. She had changed, and she felt like she was not in that situation. But John also gives emotional information as where the energies need to be rearranged and adjusted to align with that. So it's kind of, we kind of handle the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects.
Okay. I think, because we still have some questions left over here, Marilyn, that maybe we can take a break now, come back and do some questions, and then take callers. If anybody wants to call into the show, the number is 914-338-0494. and we'll take comments or questions if you would like to ask Marilyn something. So let me get to break here. It takes me a moment. Okay, everybody, we're back. I want to repeat the number to call in if you have questions or comments for Marilyn. The number is 914-338-0494. Be sure to push option number 1 so we know that you want to come on the air. Marilyn, are you here with me?
I sure am.
Okay, good. Can you explain how you feel emotions and feelings affect our lives?
Well, that's an interesting question because way back when I was younger and before I became a spiritual seeker, I didn't have feelings and I didn't know about emotions. I was frozen, kind of like an iceberg, under the water, no feelings, and anything that was up above the water line was too scary to have a feeling because you might get hurt again. So I was actually a walking zombie, not nobody's home. And so it took many years for me to get enough self-love to be able to say it's okay to have feelings. And, of course, the first feelings that surface after you've had no feelings are the negative ones that you didn't want to feel. And so many people in addictions, that's when they go back to using again because they don't want to feel those feelings. They were trying to avoid them. Mm-hmm. And in avoiding them, you actually stuff them back down in that iceberg place, and they'll come back up when you are no longer stuffing them with whatever means of addiction you're using. So to feel the feelings is very important because you can't let the energy flow through you and out if you don't feel and experience that feeling. But the really understanding that helped me was to say the feelings are just energy in motion. It's not that I'm a bad person. It's not that I'm feeling this is who I am. It's just an energy that's leaving my system. Yay. I don't have to keep that fear. I don't have to keep that anger. I don't have to keep that guilt. I felt guilty the other day. And so I don't have to keep those energies blocked up in me anymore. I've got enough self-esteem today to say it's not just an energy passing through, and I want it to pass through so I can replace it with the loving energy behind it. So today the feelings are my barometer of what's going on with me, and I'm very much touch in tune when I'm having ecstasy, bliss, or wonderful experiences. I went up in a Ferris wheel that's on the waterfront of the Seattle downtown area recently, and it was absolutely exhilarating. God provided the most beautiful sunset that night that you could imagine, and it was going through my worst fear of going up in this wheel, huge Ferris wheel. And having gone through that experience, I experienced wonderful ecstasy and excitement of being able to enjoy it, and nobody was there to poo-poo me or say, oh, now don't get too excited, Marilyn, simmer down. I was able to be myself. And so our feelings are really a guideline to what's going on, and if we take the right actions, the good feelings follow. Most people think that they're supposed to act off their feelings, and it's actually a reverse. When I acted off my fear, I got disastrous results. But when I act off the love, I get much better results. So if I'm coming into a good place and I can share that and share it around, that's what love's all about. And you get that feeling that's just marvelous. But I always did it backwards. I shared off my fear, and, of course, it was a disaster in the long run. So I would tell people today that, if you go into those spaces, that's a good time to go to meditation and let that energy change so that you can move back where you really want to be. And we go through growing periods where we're going to have fears or anger, jealousy results like that come up from past situations, and all we have to do is recognize it, let it flow through, and know it's on its way down the river or whatever, how you want to visualize it, and it's leaving your system. Let that happen, enjoy and embrace it, in fact, and say, yay, yippee-skippy, I don't need that in my life anymore. And then the love will come back in, and you can have a great experience and feeling from letting it go and saying, okay, now I'm on track again. So feelings are absolutely essential if you want to enjoy this life. And when we enjoy, that's when we're in our higher consciousness. So that's a great feedback.
Yeah, and now it's been my experience working with people that are going through their fears that they come up in layers. Do you run into that yourself?
Oh, definitely. It's kind of like a spiral. We can handle things at certain levels of vibrations, and then until we grow enough self-love to be able to move on and to handle it in another perception, another level of awareness, more awareness than we had before. Last night I had some deeper emotions and awarenesses that I've ever had in my life. I've just gotten through a whole several months of pneumonia where my death wish was leaving. This is part of my rebirth. And so, yes, it's really important to understand our feelings and to not necessarily go for medicine to stop that from happening. It actually stops the flow of energy when you take medications or toxic substances. So to enjoy it, embrace it, and just say, oh, it's just part of the change and I'm getting better. It's really actually a good thing.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of times we think we've dealt with something, and all of a sudden we have to revisit it again, and we go, well, I thought I dealt with that, and here it is. It's back worse than ever before, and I think that's the layers where it comes up, and we have to go through it and embrace it. And look at the lesson that we learned, whether it was something about what not to do ourselves to another person. I mean, it teaches us compassion when we've been through a trauma. We understand it, and we have better compassion for others that are going through something similar. And I feel that once we've learned to mend that fear, that it becomes part of our own gift and ability to share that with others too. So I think it's
I agree wholeheartedly. I've discovered that if you look at the situation from what is the lesson in this, what is the gift I'm being taught, instead of reacting from the fear, but to take the emotion away and just see it neutrally, that what is the lesson I'm learning, that puts you in a more positive way to be moving forward instead of reacting. Now you're being you're responding in love rather than reacting from the fear. Fear is false emotion appearing real. It's really like that illusion we talked about earlier, thinking that there's water in the road up ahead when it's just a mirage. And that's what the fear is. It's a mirage. And so when we can realize, oh, it's just energy leaving, yay, it's going.
And I think when we see the lesson as a gift, that we can feel gratitude for that. That's been my experience for myself and for my clients. And when we feel the gratitude, it's easier to turn around and forgive whoever harmed us or forgive the situation, forgive ourselves maybe. We put ourselves in harm's way, and we can say, hey, I learned from that. I don't have to be that way anymore. So
I think you really are quite right on completely where I'm coming from. I've learned that when I'm in gratitude, I'm actually in the presence of God. That's the now. And the fear keeps me in the past. So if I'm acting from those negative feelings, my head is still in the past, reliving all that anguish. And when I'm in gratitude, I am with God, and there is no anguish. It's all wonderful, abundance, prosperity, and happiness. And so why would I not want to move into that place? Today I tell myself I'm in joy, I'm in gratitude, and I'm in the presence of God, and that keeps me in the now, in the present, current. My life is so much better from staying current in my life in God's arms rather than reliving the past over and over, letting it go, as you say, and forgive it, and saying that's over with. I've become when we can see that it's actually helped us to mature and grow up, those were the lessons necessary to heal our karma. The lessons of the past we can bring love to. Love heals everything. And so when we can bring love to it, then we don't have to stay in the past, and we're where our power, our empowerment comes from being in the now. We don't have to stay victims.
And do you feel that everybody can achieve a higher state of consciousness?
Well, I think everybody's on the path right where they're supposed to be at this time, and we're all at different levels. I think it's possible eventually for everyone to do that. I believe it's a choice, and you mentioned that quite earlier in the program. Love is a choice. Do we want love in our lives? I didn't know I had choices from growing up in my case. I literally was a Cinderella with a lot of abuse. And I was told what to do, and if it wasn't done yesterday, there was a lot of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual punishments involved. So I didn't know I had choice. And when somebody told me I had choice in my life, I thought that was a joke at first. I mean, it was kind of amusing. What do you mean I have a choice? I'm always told what to do. And when you leave that old mental framework into a new, healthier one and see that it is all choice, I don't have to do what other people tell me to. I can have my own life, my own reality, and my own experience. And that's wonderful when you take that choice and responsibility in your life.
I would agree. And I believe that we're in order to raise our consciousness, if we approach it seriously, we're going to connect with our inner spirit to do that. And
exactly.
I think that we are all given this birthright, and if you make the choice to do it, then you can do it. And it takes different people.
Well, that's the beauty of meditation, and a lot of people don't understand what meditation is really about, but it puts you into a higher consciousness, and that's what we're talking about, is achieving that higher consciousness, and which some people even say, well, that's taking the high road, or there are other ways to achieve it too, but meditation actually is communion with love or God, or how you choose to define that higher spirit. And so when you're in that higher state, it's learning to expand it. So instead of 5 minutes a day, maybe 10, 15, 20, sometimes I meditate all day. So it depends on how much experience you want in that higher state of living, which is actually a wonderful state to be in, and that's the heaven on earth we're talking about. So the more I practice it and actually apply it in my life, the more it becomes my life.
Sure. And how do you feel we can support that new perception?
Well, one of the ways is to find people that can help support you because they're on the same path in a similar space that you're in. I have been very blessed. You and I would get along great. I can see that today.
Sure.
I have a very dear friend who is also a psychic medium counselor, and we're on the phone. She's out of state. She's going to be flying in this Thursday to do a retreat near my house, and we're looking forward to that. But she and I are on the phone several times a week and on emails daily, supporting each other as we go through these times when, like you say, the layers that come up. When the layers come up, she'll call me or I'll call her, and we'll immediately go into some kind of a regression to help go back to the root cause. Where is this coming from? And she helps me to resolve it and heal it in beautiful ways. And I do the same for her. In fact, we did this actually this morning together. I had an issue from being sick last night, and I understood what it was about. She says, what did you find out? And I told her, so she says, do you want to work on that? And I said, sure. So if you have somebody that you can, it might be a counselor that's in this same path that we're in, somebody that you can be as open and honest about what's happening with you is the best way. Or maybe some groups that work on a spiritual basis that can be supportive. So, and there are several good supportive spiritual groups or spiritual organizations. So I would suggest that even good spiritual books, Joel Goldsmith is one of my very, very favorite, and Course in Miracles is another, and Edgar Cayce. There's some good spiritual material that supports us also.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to look around and see who walks in your intimate space with you, and if that person, or if those individuals, I should say, are being supportive, or if they drag you down. And if they drag you down, you need to create some distance. And it doesn't matter if they're family or friends. If they're not giving you the support that you need. If they can't accept, that doesn't mean they have to believe everything you believe, but if they can at least support you in what you believe and say, well, that's good for you, that's fine. But if somebody is telling you you're wrong and you have to believe this way, or there's only one path, you need to create some distance from those people, because they'll help you create blockages for yourself, and that just gets in the way.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the hardest one for me was leaving my parents and family, because I just didn't understand. Actually, this was like 30 years ago, but just currently, we talk about layers. Just currently, I really understand how sick those people were. And to walk away, at first I thought I felt guilty that I was supposed to be part of the family and fit in no matter what, and it was very dysfunctional, mentally ill, alcoholism, and sexual abuse and whatever. So to walk away, and not continue to take the abuse was a real strong problem, because I know you bond to the negative. So I had to look at it from a new point of view. I had to say, I'm not betraying them. I'm walking away to live.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then when you're in that type of situation, as you step away, what you find is that because you're in a higher consciousness or a higher awareness, that you draw people to you who are on a similar level, and you find that support, and you make wonderful friends, and they become family to you, a spiritual family of sorts. And the circle that you work with, your social circle and your spiritual circles, are very important to take a real good look at and make sure they're healthy.
Marilyn, I agree with you heartedly. In fact, that's one of the things I actually was working on just recently is God became my real father, and Mother Mary my real mother, and her mother became I didn't have a grandmother, so she became my grandmother. I have a spiritual family that is invisible in my life, and it's about looking at those, like my guides and angels and masters and those people in my life. So it's important to find whatever works, and I have some people in my life, like you say, a spiritual family that is oriented into recovery like I am, and spiritual path of growing, and that's what we need to support us. Is they might not be our physical family, but they do become our family.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say being a spiritual person means to you?
Oh, interesting. I've never had anybody ask me that. To me, a spiritual person is love-based. They claim the love within them, and they want to manifest that love around them, and they're open to growing and continuing, expanding their horizons into moving forward into a life that just keeps expanding, and it's eternal, it's forever, and it's wonderful. Today, as a spiritual person, I have no fear of passing. I'm fearless. When I went up in that Ferris wheel, that was my last fear, and I'm fearless today, and it's a marvelous place to be.
Yeah, I think the difference between being a religious person and a spiritual person is that when you take the spiritual focus, it becomes very intimate. When you're a religious person, you're listening to somebody else tell you how to go about things, and not that religion is bad, but the spiritual teachings of religion are usually reserved for the clergy, and they don't necessarily teach it to the parishioners. But when you are spiritual, you have an intimate relationship with your guidance, and in whatever forms that may take. You have an intimate relationship with your inner spirit. You have it with Creator and Mother Earth. It changes everything. And when you see the sacred, when you learn to feel it and see it and interact with it, then life becomes sacred. And I think that's what it means to me, anyway.
Well, I'd like to just add one to that, because
sure,
to me this has become really important. In fact, I was just talking to somebody about this earlier today. Churches encourage you to look to a particular person to save them, but there's nothing outside of yourself that can save you. It's an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
And churches also, look that you should be a peaceful person, but you have to find the peace inside to be able to manifest it. So churches are teaching you to look outside for your salvation, and spirituality helps you look inside and find your salvation.
Absolutely. Now, how do you achieve moving into the moment and leave your history, your drama, and your worry behind?
It's taken me 30 years to achieve that. You want that in a nutshell? It's a daily, to me, it's a daily process of identifying any thoughts, words, and communication or experiences that pop up emotionally from the past, and I continually, as soon as I recognize them, sometimes it takes a little while, but I do it quicker today than I used to turn them into positive, from negative to positive. So, in fact, what just came up in the last couple of days here is I have had some deep pain, and I wondered where it was coming from, and I have some material that helps me understand where the emotions are that are causing certain pain in your body. So part of the pain was coming from, I hate myself. And so I started immediately saying I love myself, because today I do. I have self-love, which I didn't have 30 years ago. And I have worked very, very hard to release as much negativity and trauma and drama from my life as possible over the years on a daily basis. And so the negative energy was time for it to leave. So I just am easier to move into the now and say, I choose to align only the energy which aligns with God. Satan, get thee behind me. So I can use that tool or ask God to humbly remove, that I didn't realize until 30 years ago when I was asked about, what the church minister was talking about, love your neighbor as yourself, and I realized I didn't in those days. But today when it came up, as you say, on another level, I could immediately, much quicker anyway, say, get this energy behind me. It's not something I choose to be aligned with, because it isn't the truth of who I am today. So I am constantly, for the most part, identifying it quickly, releasing it quickly, asking God to replace that old energy with His love and grace, light and peace and joy. And believe it or not, the pain left. And this is lower back pain I've had for some time. So we can change our energies into lining up into the now and having better health. So the more we're aware, then we can use the tools at our disposal to make that energy shift. And a lot of times it's a choice to say, I don't choose this anymore. I choose something better for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No,
but it doesn't.
Go ahead.
It doesn't come overnight.
No, it doesn't. It's a work in progress for sure.
Exactly.
What do you do or say to someone who comes to you and they're feeling shame or guilt-ridden for something in the past and they're loathing themselves because of that?
Well, I usually have people that come to me that are open to regression, and if they're not, and we talk about it, how would you feel about going into an altered state? And I explain that we're always in an altered state every morning when we wake up, and when we go to sleep at night, that haziness that we're in is that altered meditative state, and that's what hypnosis is. And so are you willing to go into this state and talk to your inner self and find out where you felt that originally? And when you feel the root cause of that situation, they explain what happened, that's the problem, and then you can ask for the healing information. And the healing information that they share sometimes can be very beautiful. I had a client one time who was trying to heal some rage. She was totally out of control with her rage. And so we asked for the healing information after going through most of the process about what did her body have to tell her for healing the situation, and it told her that it had created her thyroid problem to take her attention off of her rage because it was so out of control, and gave her some explicit information, directions of what to do to love herself from her past trauma that was quite sincere, very deep, very intense. And so she went home. In those days, I tape recorded things. Today I use an MP3 player, but she went home with the tape and played it over and over and did what she was told to do. And she came back several months later, and she says, now I no longer need my thyroid medication. It's been resolved. So if people are willing to look at themselves and be totally honest with what's going on in their situation, then it can be resolved in real loving, healthy ways, and the Spirit can come in and show them how loved they are and that they've always been loved, and they can release those things that are not loving.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think it's so important to understand, first of all, that we're the ones that judge ourselves, and it isn't Spirit judging us. We're here to learn. And
exactly.
we learn sometimes by our mistakes, but the love of Creator and the Earth Mother are, you can't put it into words. It's amazing. And if someone can just be touched by that once, they're going to know how precious they are and how deeply loved they are, because it's a permeation. The energy that love brings forward it's beyond words. It's beyond words, and it's unconditional. We're the ones that are conditioned to be ashamed of ourselves, and we're born sinners and all this kind of thing. And I don't believe that for a minute. I don't believe that we are born to sin.
Well, you and I are on the same page for that. I know I was created in the loving spirit of a higher power, a loving God who is eternal, and I was created in love, and that's who I am, and I'm a divine being. I am a Christed being releasing human faults. And when I came into that understanding that I was born with a Christed consciousness, and it's just the human, material, three-dimensional world that got in the way, then I can release it, remove it, and move into the truth of who I am. And, you know, people that come to you for counseling are very blessed because you have an unusual, unique understanding of what really is going on with people. And when you are helping people, they're actually merging with your energy and getting well. So the people that come to you are very, very fortunate.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I believe that our inner spirit is divine. It is eternal. And if we can see ourselves as that spirit rather than the human body, which is a vehicle for it, we can recognize that indeed we're not born with sin. We're not bad people. We learned, we made mistakes, we tried things, people said don't do it, but we did it anyway, those kinds of things. But we need to learn that experience was our teacher then, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. You can go back and you can say I'm sorry to some people. Sometimes you can't go back and say you're sorry. Maybe it's too late to do that. But you can forgive yourself, and you can address that person, whether they're here or have gone on to the other side. You can address their higher selves. They're going to hear you.
Exactly.
The spirit world hears everything. So,
and that's one of the things I like. I can actually vocally bring in people from the other side, too. At times I do that, and people can resolve their comments that didn't get made before they passed over. So if it was about forgiving or understanding or a mistake, I had a very unusual situation one time where this minister was in spiritual program. He was not of the traditional minister like I am or you would be. And so he was looking for answers like we're talking about today. And his father wanted to come and talk to him in spirit. He said, oh, no, he was very, very, very angry with his father and didn't want to talk with him at all. In fact, this situation happened when I went for my first past life regression training in Virginia. And he was very adamant and upset that I would even want to bring in his father. And most people want to talk to their loved ones, and I thought that was rather unusual. So he talked to somebody else at one point, a good friend, and his father was standing there with a blanket over his head, a black blanket, and said, I would like to talk with my son. And finally the minister agreed. Now, I don't know what was said because it transpired it went through me as a channel between the two of them. And all of a sudden, the father was taking the blanket off his head, and the son, the minister, was in joyful expression. And they discovered that the reason they had this difficulty was they had misunderstood some information. It had all been a mistake. And so the next day, this minister went to greet his wife when she came to the hotel to pick him up from the program. And he's running down the hall. He says, you won't believe what happened. You won't believe what happened. And, so he was just thrilled that he came into harmony with his father. And I think this is why we're here, Cinnamon, to help people come into harmony with those about them. It was like healing the universe.
Yes, absolutely. Well, if we can heal the situation or the differences, then the other person becomes healed by that very act.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. How would you describe the ego and its purpose?
Well, I do that in the book, and the ego is, some people call it edging God out. It was absolutely important at one point in our lives. In fact, our ego is our inner being of who we are, and it actually got inflated to overextend its abilities, and that's what causes the trouble. So the ego is actually an important part of our system, but when it feels like it's not enough, good enough, or whatever, it tries to protect us. The ego is like a periscope that comes up out of the inner part of who we are to scope around what's going on around us so we can take appropriate action and behavior. But if it sees something damaging or harmful coming towards us, then it wants to shut down the body and protect you. Now, this is what causes illness. So your body can't have the energy flowing through it because you're shut down from the light of the Spirit of God inside. It becomes dark. In fact, when I first got into doing this kind of recovery, I went to try to understand what was going on with me, and there was just this little candle inside of me, barely lit, hardly going to stay lit and can't talk right now. And what I realized was that my soul was I was told I was dying at the time. And, it was because I was so shut down from trying to protect myself from all the abuse. And so I was told, well, we'll love you until you can love yourself. And that's when I didn't know I didn't love myself. My family was mentally ill, alcoholic, sex addictions, rageaholic, and I didn't know anything about love. I really didn't know a thing about love, and I was dying. And so the ego says, well, I'll take care of you. Well, as we grow up, hopefully, we discover that we don't have to listen to the ego. It's actually not helping the problem when you get to be a mature person. You can't continue to act like an immature little kid. Anger is just a temper tantrum. You didn't get your way. So you have to grow up and become more mature about these situations. And so the ego, if it's in its natural, normal state, is just your basic personality. But when it feels threatened, then it comes up and says, well, I'm going to protect you. But the problem is when we believe that, after a certain stage, it works against us, and we have to outgrow the ego and move into the love of our hearts. So the ego served a purpose at one time. But when we are no longer needing to protect ourselves, if we're little children, and I was raised in domestic violence, when you move out of the domestic violence, you don't have to protect yourself. It's time for you to move on and say, I don't choose to recreate what I just left. I want to have a healthier, better life. And I'm not going to recreate it by doing what my parents did. I'm going to learn a new, higher, loving way to handle my life. And that's what I had to do, was to quit listening to the ego. And I discovered, there was a movie years ago called The Beautiful Mind, and the fellow was a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician, and he was also a paranoid schizophrenic. And but through all his mental illness, he was able to win this prize. And at the end of the movie, he's kind of basically back down to earth, handling life really pretty well. And they asked him the question, well, what happened? What changed? And he says, I quit listening to the voices in my head.
Mm-hmm. And wouldn't you say that the ego resides in the mind? It gets defensive, it gets protective, it inflates, and that the spirit speaks through the heart, and the ego can sometimes have a very loud voice, and it can it's like a strong wind when you're shouting into it. Your voice, the voice of the heart, has no carriage. And
well,
so
I agree with you, and then it makes it even harder because when the government, which is coming up now, the government's trying to force vaccinations on everybody, and so the government is giving everybody a big scare. 9/11 was a great big fear. Every night on the news, it's always the news is considered who got shot, who got robbed, who got car accidents, and so many died. I mean, then everything around you is perpetuating fear. The video games. I went to a movie recently, and in the lobby of the movie theater is assault weapons that are plastic for a video game. It's teaching kids to use those kinds of weapons. They're sitting right there in the movie lobby. So there's violence around everybody, and that ego just inflates what you already have as fear, and that makes it even more fearful.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I think that we have to learn to silence it, and there are techniques to employ to do that, but we have to learn to silence the ego and let the heart speak, because when we come
that's
from the heart, everything
the whole
changes.
lesson in life is to quit listening to the ego, only using our heart as our guidance, and that's the answer. That's where we'll find the truth.
Yeah. It's a clever place to tuck it, isn't it?
Story. I gave a talk once at church, and it was a cute little parable, I guess you'd say, of the forces or the gods in heaven trying to figure out where to hide, who we are, where to hide our soul. And they talk about putting it in the ocean or on the highest mountain and all the various places you could maybe hide it. And they said, no, you put it inside and people will never find it.
Yeah. Well, it's hard for a lot of people to look within. And I call it facing the great smoking mirror, because we have to look at our shadow side, and we have to look at we all have one. We all have a dark nature within us, and if you can recognize it, you can tame it. And then it can be transmuted
I think that's
into something
true for
positive.
everybody. I just reviewed a book on Amazon. Somebody was writing a book and said that we come in with a clean slate, and of course, in my review, I couldn't let that one go by. Because I know from my experience, I came in with tons of karma from family, generational issues, medical issues, 7 lives of domestic violence I've had to heal, other relationships with family members. I came in with a ton of agenda that needed to have energy shift into love from the fear of whatever situations were in my history. And that's one reason I love past life regression, is you can bring those up and resolve them into loving solutions. And I did not come into this life with a clean slate. I wish, in a way, I would have an opportunity to do that sometime.
Well, I think people can see the clean slate as the innocence of the infant, but our spirit is the sum total of all past lives, and it does carry baggage forward. It has. If it hasn't been resolved, it has to be resolved, and it's an ongoing issue.
I agree, and that takes. Well, we can't. what I've discovered is we are a whole spirit. We're a Holy Spirit. Those dark parts of us have splintered off because of whatever abuse and calamity that's been in our life, and as we can bring it back together in love, we become a whole spirit again. We are a Holy Spirit, and most people would think that's, against religion, but that's the word I was thinking of. Thank you. And blasphemy, but we are Holy Spirits. We are whole divine spirit, and so that's what, to me, the search is all about, is coming into our wholeness and oneness with Spirit.
Yeah, I would agree. And what would you recommend somebody do to overcome their ego?
Oh, my. Well, as I have found it works for me, I make a list of all my fears on a piece of paper, on another piece of paper, all my angers, on all my negative behaviors that have not achieved what I wanted, on a third piece of paper. I write down this is in my next coming book. I give the details of how to do this. The next column next to it would be what's the cause of that particular situation, that fear. I'll use fear as an example. That's an easy one. And then how is it affecting me? And usually fear affects your self-esteem and your relationships and your emotional security and your ambitions and so forth, your material security, so forth. And so then you have to get honest with yourself and say, where am I being dishonest with myself? Where am I being dishonest,
self-sabotaging or whatever?
Where am I being self-seeking and not honest with myself? But where am I fooling myself? And I'm being inconsiderate of myself by not addressing these things. So every time I keep fear, I'm actually hurting myself, because that fear becomes an illness. Or in my case, I had a fear of getting my car stolen, and guess what? It got stolen. Because you attract to you what that fear is. So I discovered fear is really a lack of faith. So today, the quickest way I get rid of fear is to say, where am I not trusting God or the universe for my well-being? It's a lack of faith. So I just try to insert faith in there and say, okay, God, you're going to take care of this one.
And that's one of the things I tell people to do is if it's beyond your control, it's okay to put it in Spirit's hands and say, can you help me? Please do this. But we have to ask for that help. They're going to be watching us. They're going to be protecting us to a degree. But if we need help, we have to ask for it. And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask.
Well, that's a very good point. I was taught as a kid not to ask for help. My stepdad slapped me in the face and said, I didn't want you to mow the grass. I wanted you to mow the grass because I didn't want to do it and get out there and do it. And I wasn't supposed to ask for help. The wheel was caught in a rut in the ground, and I couldn't get it out because I was just a little kid at the time. And I asked for help and was definitely reprimanded. So I had to learn that it's safe to ask God for help. That's the right person. That's the right place to go for help. And that my angels will help me if I ask. I'm also an artist, and I used to paint tote bags, and on the tote bag I wrote and had a picture of an angel on there and says, ask your angel for help, because they really are there to help us. And that's probably one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have, is that we are surrounded by spirit that is waiting to help us.
They are, and they just need to be invited in. And knock on the door shall be opened, It will open to us, and all we have to do is ask. I think it's so important to give yourself permission to do that. You can't force feed someone. You can't, if someone is closed-minded and they're not open, then you can talk till you're blue in the face, and it's not going to do any good, because they're already full of their negative opinions and belief structures. And if someone is open and they say, well, explain this to me, then you can tell them, and they can understand and they can do what they want with it, but it will usually resonate with them.
It's nice when I get clients. I call them sponges. They're always asking me about this. Tell me about this, and they're always looking for where they can find out how to handle it differently, better. I call them my sponges.
Yeah. I call serious or curious. I call it. So
that's cute.
A lot of people want just they're curious about the information. They need to go think on it, and that's fine. That's how we learn. But when you get a serious client, it's wonderful. It's so exciting to watch them grow.
Exactly.
Marilyn, what would you say? Why the fifth dimension is called heaven on earth, and define that one more time for everybody, please.
Okay. We actually are going through different dimensions energy-wise, and we come into planet Earth, which is third dimension. Third dimension is actually being eliminated. There's actually a book called The Disappearance of the Universe. The third dimension is being dissolved through the more love coming into the planet. With more love, we're going into the fourth dimension. We're actually learning to open up to our hearts to that love and using it in our lives, which is productive, which is what this talk has been about today. And so as we grow higher and higher in consciousness in fourth dimension, we then come to the point where we are ready to be love-based people living without any calamity, pomp and circumstance, or disaster, abuse, and lack of. We don't limit ourselves anymore. We've moved into the fifth dimension. Some people call it the New Age. Some people call it heaven. Heaven and nirvana are actually two different terms. Nirvana is where people and their spirit goes as they pass over out of the human form. And heaven is on earth. It's a state of being. Hell is between your ears, and heaven is between your ears. And what you see out your vision, if you're only seeing difficult situations, you're in third dimension. But if you're seeing all the beauty and glory of this wonderful planet and the love and the wonderful, exciting experiences of like the national parks and the oceans, and I love going to the Pacific Ocean. For me, that's just amazing. I had a past life of Sacagawea, and that was her big goal, was to go see the Pacific Ocean. So, and she was able to do that with Lewis and Clark. So the point is that we have a chance to see that invisible energy that is love all around us, unconditional love, and to live in that experience on this earth, which is now moving into supporting that energy. So it's a matter of changing what's between our ears and thinking loving thoughts and letting that manifest into our lives. Thoughts do manifest. Energy becomes matter. Father, Spirit, and Mother, Spirit. Father is the Spirit, Mother is the matter. And as they merge together, we can have that heaven. And we don't have to have all the atrocities that have happened in the past. And we can walk out of that into a life that is pleasant, prosperous, abundance. It's already there. The only thing that has stopped it is our fear. We can release it, as we've talked about at this point, and that's the veil. The veil can disappear so that there is nothing stopping the unconditional love of who we are and what we're about. And enjoy, we're here to enjoy and to have a good, we are good people. Like I agree with you, we're not sinners. We're good people, and we're here to enjoy and be ourselves. We don't have to play games. We don't have to hurt anybody. We just come and we are in sharing with others, sharing all the goodness that is there and in spirit. So it's a matter of a choice, as we talked about.
The goodness is infinite. That's what's so amazing when you let it in. The source of it is infinite, so you're not going to run out of it. Share it. Share it to your heart's content. There's going to be more. It's so simple, and yet we complicate it so much.
When I discovered God was limitless, and I discovered there was a commercial on television years ago with Tina Turner walking down the street, and her attractive legs had Hanes nylons on them, and she says, I don't limit myself anymore. I thought that was an amazing comment because I've discovered today I don't limit myself. My God is limitless, and I'm limitless because I'm part of God.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. Earlier in the program, we were talking about regression and how you had come to death's door. And you mentioned that you don't fear death. And I have never feared it. Never. It's always felt good to me that when the time comes, I'll be ready to go across, and there's nothing to fear. It's going to be beautiful. I have had a near-death experience, and I know how good it felt. I was sent back. I was guided back and resurfaced, but I've never felt the fear of death, and I thought maybe I could get you to talk on that a little bit, because you said you didn't fear it either.
Yes, I've had some experiences that really changed my way of handling that in my lifetime. One of the experiences I had was when my mother died. I was fortunate to be in the hospital room with her alone, and she was in kind of a coma. She was still could hear me talk and respond, but she was not able to really talk herself. And so we were talking, and I saw her kind of struggle, and I just knew it was time. And so she was struggling and resisting, and she was a good Lutheran. So I said to her, Mom, I said, Jesus is right behind you. Just relax into his arms. And she laid back on her pillow, and I saw her spirit leave. I can't put words to it, but it changed my life. It was beautiful, and I cannot tell you what happened in any specific terms except that all of a sudden I was changed. I also had a radio show about 10 years ago myself. I was on regular radio that you tune on in a dial. And I had a fellow I was interviewing on my show, and he said it's like you're in the material world, and when you pass over, it's just a transition. You just take your coat off of your physical body, hang it on the coat rack, and then your spirit just continues. So between those two situations, I've also been very close to, I've had half a dozen at least times when my husband tried to kill me. I've tried suicide. I've been close to death lots and lots of times. And I'll have to admit and honor my angels. I happen to have had 6 angels with me to come into this lifetime because my past was so severe. They said I needed all of them to keep me alive. One of those angels was Archangel Michael, and that's the kind of strength I needed in some of my situations. Because I was 30 years in a battery and abusive marriage of rape. And so to survive all of that, I needed angels' help. And so on one of my suicidal tries, I actually saw my angels. They came. And I knew they were in my life because I went off the cliff at the Grand Canyon. This is in my first book. I went off the cliff at the Grand Canyon, and my angels took the car and gradually turned the car upside down so we would land easily on the snow on a jutment that came out from the side of the Grand Canyon. We were about 20 feet down off the edge in an area that jutted out. And the ranger scratched his head and said they'd never had anyone with this kind of an accident walk away without a scratch. So I've had so many experiences where I've been so close to death. When I tried suicide, they showed up and stayed with me constantly until I could get to a more spiritual place. I could go on where they've saved my life in many situations. So I know today we have spiritual help, and if it's not my time, I was actually in the doctor's office receiving shots for bladder problems, and I left my body, and they thought they were going to lose me. And I literally didn't understand what was going on with me, but I knew something strange was. And I said to myself, God, you're going to put me on the side you want me on, whatever side it is, that's okay. That particular experience happened twice, and each time I walked out of the doctor's office and came home, obviously, God, it wasn't my time to leave. So it's to me, it's in God's hands when this is going to happen, and I'm actually ready to go anytime He says, now we want you on the other side because we need you to do such and such. It's kind of like, yay, that's great, new experience. It's not scary at all. It's like, well, it's just going to be a new adventure.
I agree. I don't. I hear people that have near-death experiences talk about very hellish experiences too. That it's not all beautiful, and I have to wonder if that isn't their own fear that they're experiencing and having to pass through.
It's their own consciousness coming up to hit them in the face.
Mhm.
I happen to be a person that goes to the Near-Death International Association for Near-Death Studies, and I've heard hundreds of people tell their near-death stories. What I have come to understand is that whatever consciousness you leave the earth with and you go to nirvana, it's like levels of consciousness, and hopefully the next time you come back and you raise your consciousness into more and more of God's love, and so you keep coming back until you finally get to the point where you're ready to go into fifth dimension, unconditional love. And so if you haven't raised your consciousness, that's the place you go. And if that's a person, see, in my case, before I tried the suicide one time, I prayed to God and I said, I know you're not supposed to do this, but what you have for me has got to be better than what's in my house. And that's when the angels came. I probably would have gone to a hellish place in that case if I hadn't have prayed beforehand. But I was 3 years old emotionally at that point and had no answers or clue or hope. So it was a very desperate spot, and I prayed for help, and I didn't have to go to that hellish place. I know today my consciousness was extremely low, and that's probably where I would have ended up. So it's all. This is why my book's so important. We can raise that consciousness out of that hell on earth. We can raise it out of experiencing that type of situation where it's so fearful and threatening and devastating that we can't enjoy ourselves and be ourselves, that we're victims and abused and all that problems. If we start sending out love to others, that's what's going to come back to us.
And I really don't believe there's anything to fear on the other side. I know when I did a vision quest and I did a life review with that, and there was no judgment from the other side. It was me judging my life.
Exactly. What I've learned is there's only one God. It's all love. The only thing that it's that illusion again, or that thinking that there's water on the road, It's not real. If there's only one power, there can't be anything but love. So to move out of the illusion that there's a negative force or evil's the lack of light. So start shining light on your situation. That's all there is light, and it's just the lack of it that's causing the trouble.
I agree. Well, I think people are getting are interested in what we're having to say. I don't have any callers on the line waiting to ask questions, so I guess we're answering them.
Well, I hope so. I sent out the phone number and the program to my friends, and so I was hoping somebody'd call in.
That's okay. We'll keep talking. You said you belong to an organization that studies near-death experiences?
Well, yes, it's called IANDS, IANDS. It's an international group of people that come together in Seattle. They call it all over the world, but come together in Seattle and support each other because there's no way for a person who's had a near-death experience to find others with similar stories to validate and make their situation real, like they didn't make it up, that really happened. I'm not the only one. And so, and they can learn, we learn from each other. I've had a near-death experience too. So, the point is that it was a beautiful group that came together. They have a convention once a year. I've never been to any of the conventions, just the monthly meetings. But to hear the different stories can be just Oh, well, the first time I went, I said to God, I said, am I supposed to really be going to this? And so the first time I showed up for the meeting, the whole ceiling was filled with angels. It's such a wonderful place to go. It's so spiritual. People that have had this experience are not the ones that are just out there walking on the streets. These people have had an experience that really has transformed them in many ways. And the environment, the energy is very, very wonderful.
Mhm. And it does change people. Now, I think in some ways that we're meant to have these experiences so we know things. We know what it's like. But at the same time, you're going to run across these people that have them maybe 2 or 3 times, and they still don't learn.
Well, that's interesting. I found that to be true from some of the people that talk. They never really got the message, so to speak. One time in this fellow, Howard Storm, wrote a book, and I got the book, and he talked, and he became a minister after his near-death experience, but he didn't get the real message like we're talking about today, and I thought that was most interesting, but he did become a minister.
Yeah. And I know people that have had close calls, and they go right back to living the same old life that they were living that brought it on in the first place. It's like I'm immortal or something, and the human body isn't. Your spirit might be, but your body isn't. What are you doing? You wonder about some of them, but it's just not their time to learn, evidently. But it feels to me that the majority of people that experience these events are changed, and they're changed for the better. They become more filled with grace, filled with love.
One of the
they
first
come back
people
and they carry it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do. Betty Eady was one of the first people I ever heard talk who had a near-death experience, and I heard her talk several times. So I think that she and Moody and several other people opened up the door. Weiss does the past life regressions, and Newton, who did a lot of work with people in regression work and so forth, has opened up the door more for people to be aware of this and learn from this and say, hey, there's more out there than what we really know about.
Yeah. I agree. Well, we do have somebody in queue. I'm going to bring him on. This is Jay.
Wonderful.
Hi, Jay.
Hello, how's it going?
Oh, good. How are you this evening?
Doing fine.
Good. Did you have comments or questions?
I've actually a question, to your guest. It's in regards to past life. It seems like, how do you know when you meet a person, maybe meetings or whatever, that they're from a past life experience you had with them? And are you supposed to actually resolve something with them at that time, or does it give you would you say it, a shifting of your soul to a different, how would you say, a sense of knowing that maybe there was a lesson here I had to learn? I just wonder what your thoughts about that.
Well, that's interesting, because each time I've met somebody who is from a past life, it's definitely been different every time. When I was taking a class to become a minister, one of the gals, part of what we did, because it was a spiritual minister for counseling, we did past life regression, and it turned out that she and I were very, very close women friends in our last lifetime. But she didn't want to stay connected, and she wasn't interested in making up a friendship from it, so I don't know where she is today. I went to a spiritual Edgar Casey group, Search for God study group, about 20 years ago, and walked through the door, and there was a man sitting in the chair. All of a sudden, my soul went right out to him and connected, and I had an inner message that said that sometime you will have a relationship with this man, and that's who I go with today. Over 14 years of unconditional love in that relationship. He came to help me through a lot of healing I needed. He's a wonderful healer. and he's been helping me in wonderful ways. I've had past lives with just regular friends. She's no longer a friend today because of circumstances, but I know that we had a past life together. I know a fellow in my life we were just about everything. He was my father, mother, brother, sister in various lives, and I ran into him in this life, and I knew he was a very safe person to be with at a time in my life when I needed that, because I knew that we had to have these past lives that were healthy and safe together. So each time you meet somebody, it might be for a different reason. The hardest ones are in your family. You come in with soul groups. Your family comes in with you reincarnated as groups. And my half-sister today was in a past life I had several thousand years ago. I was not an honorable person in those days, much different than I am today, and did a deadly deed, so to speak, to her, and she came back in this lifetime and retaliated, which I had to learn to forgive and overcome and not continue the game of get even and revenge. So I had to learn to give that up so that we could heal it, and today she and I can actually get along actually quite well recently compared to what things were in the past. So every time people that come into our lives from a past life, it's another lesson of some sort to heal our soul, heal that energy, bring harmony and love to it. And some might stay and some might not stay. It might be a short-lived situation, and thankfully the one that I'm going with, this wonderful person, has been a long-term, very beneficial situation. So you just kind of, if you're doing meditation or reflective thinking or whatever, you just might ask from your insides, what am I supposed to learn from this experience, and help me to guide me through it so I handle it in a way that I can heal whatever is necessary to heal.
Can I ask you another question here, actually, when you're being up?
Yeah.
Because, I watched a couple movies just recently, or just a while back. I was watching Matrix and just watched a movie that came out, Insurgent, and they had a similar ending. And what's really interesting is about, instead of fighting, you think you're going to be fighting with someone else, you're fighting yourself. And when you actually surrender and not do anything, things turn out. But always forgiveness is always a part of it. And I just wondered, I just find it's always a common factor in our involvement of something, or, moving past blockages, even past life stuff. I just wondered what your thoughts about that. It sounds like it's a bigger thing that we usually give it, not credit to, but just one of the lessons that should be on top of our list.
Well, I think you've hit a really good thing. That probably the one thing that Cinnamon and I didn't bring up is the people in our lives are mirrors to us. They are mirroring our dark side of what needs to be healed. And you are really forgiving yourself because they have come in to play that part for you to see what that particular situation is, or fault or shortcoming is that you need to heal. And they have responded to your request to play that part for you in this lifetime. So they're actually doing you a favor. And so since we're all one in spirit, they're just a part of your energy that's playing that part for you to have spiritual growth if you choose to forgive and love yourself, that you needed that experience to grow and move beyond it so you can have a higher consciousness in this life or the next life, or so you come in with a higher state of mind and experience in your next lifetime. So those people, everybody in our life is a mirror, and when you are mirrored back wonderful, glorious things, obviously you've done something right. But when somebody comes back into your life and it's really difficult, you'd say, what am I sending out that is manifesting in my life, and they're showing it to me? And when I came to the understanding, I had to not only forgive the person, but thank them for playing that part, because I wrote the script and they acted in it. I had an experience where my ex-husband came back in spirit, and this is a man that tried to kill me. He came back in spirit, and he says, do you know how much I loved you to play that part? And I just fell apart because it was a pretty ugly situation, marriage. And to know that somebody would love me enough to be that mean and ornery and out of control, that they would help me when I really needed that help, that meant a lot to me. I was actually able to be around later, and even though it had been such a threatening situation at one time. So we do heal these situations, and they're part of the different splinters of our soul that have come back to be healed.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I had someone do something to me similar, and he had crossed over. And I had been trying to find forgiveness for it, but the pain was so deep, and I was really struggling with it, and I prayed on it, and the answer that came back to me was, you're blocking somebody's path on the other side by not giving forgiveness. And I was shocked. I was shocked because I would never stand in anyone's way of growth and development. That's what I'm here to help people with. So instantly I had the forgiveness. How could I do that? Let me step out of the way. Go, please, go, grow. And the forgiveness was right there, and it changed everything instantly. But it took that answer to help me find it.
Exactly. I prayed for my stepdad.
I was holding them energetically. I was holding them to me. And really, when you don't forgive, that aspect is there, but it's also a very negative, bitter emotion that you carry inside yourself, and it will attack you physically over time, and it'll cause disease. And you're the one that's suffering. You're the one that's carrying it. They've moved on.
Yeah, you want to cut the chains to the past.
Yeah.
You don't want to carry that bondage with you.
No, not at all. It's an anchor that prevents you from growing in certain ways because it blocks you. So you want to let go of it, Jake.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was actually in town here, we had a medium person who was talking about different people and stuff like that out in the audience. And it always comes around too, the forgiveness thing. Oh, I should have forgiven you, and shouldn't. It's kind of ironic for me. I mean, we have this in lifetime, maybe 70 years to do this stuff, and then we get to the other side. We coulda, woulda, coulda, shoulda. When we have this, heaven on earth to do this stuff. It's really interesting how we.
It is. I know some people that have taken their own life and crossed, and once on the other side, they regretted it. They came back to say, I shouldn't have done that, because I still have to work on that issue now on this side.
Well, my aunt committed suicide, and that's how I got into becoming a medium. She started coming to me in my dreams, and she said, I'm sorry I did this because I have to come back and complete the lessons I didn't finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's not a way out for the individual, although they think it is at the time, and that's their mind telling them there's nothing left to cope with. They're desperate.
Yeah.
So, but I do think forgiveness of self and of others is vitally important. I don't believe you need to carry revenge in your heart and go try to harm somebody that's harmed you. You need to walk away from it and distance yourself, yes, but forgive them and find the lesson and be grateful for it and know that this has taught you compassion for others who have gone through something similar, and it's taught you the grace to open your heart to them and maybe help somebody heal or whatever, but you're feeling gratitude for that lesson. I know what not to do by what was done to me.
Well, love heals everything, even karma.
Yeah.
It's like going into a dark room and turning on the light. Where did the darkness go? It just disappears in the light. So when we are in the light, those things dissolve and they're no longer issues.
Yeah, well, that's a wrap for tonight. We've got 90 seconds to close the show, so I want to thank you so much, Marilyn, for joining us this evening, and Jay, thank you for calling in.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Marilyn, would you repeat your contact information for those who would like to get in touch with you, please?
Thank you. My website is angelicasgifts.com. My angel is Angelica, so it's Angelica's Gifts. I have a blog at marilynredmondbooks.blogspot.com. My books and writings are on Amazon.com. I have lots of YouTubes, lectures, interviews, and channeling information through John, St. Germain, Jesus, and others on YouTube. So if you check YouTube, you'll find my name and information. Or if you forget my name, Marilyn Redmond, remember it, actually, just Google my name. You'll find all these things on the search engine. So Marilyn Redmond, and you might check out Amazon.com for my books and AngelicasGifts.com for my website. And checking out my blog and YouTubes, you'll find the information like what we've shared today, but even more so. So I hope you keep searching and finding your answers.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. You truly are a blessing and the reason the show comes across the airwaves every Monday evening. Join me again next Monday night when my guest will be Kim. She's an animal communicator and has some interesting information and stories to share with us. Until next week, everyone, remember, you stand in your own light, make it shine, be a beacon. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.